Have you ever noticed how the right person calls at the exact moment you think of them? Or how a small coincidence suddenly feels like a message tailored just for you? Most people dismiss these synchronicities as chance, but what if they were actually signposts guiding you toward something bigger? The truth is, synchronicity is one of the simplest yet most powerful forces available to us. But because it feels so subtle, almost invisible, most of us ignore it. The irony is that while everyone is searching for answers, meaning, and direction, synchronicity is constantly offering it in the quietest ways possible. In this video, you'll discover why this process is so simple, why almost nobody takes it seriously, and how learning to read synchronicities can completely shift the way you live. If you've ever wanted the universe to give you a clear signal, stay with me, because by the end, you'll see those signals everywhere. And before we dive deep, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this journey into unlocking the patterns that are already shaping your life. Have you ever had the strange feeling that life is trying to whisper something to you, almost like a secret coded into the fabric of your day? A song comes on the radio at just the right moment. A stranger says something that answers the exact question you've been wrestling with internally. Or maybe, in the middle of an overwhelming choice, a sign appears, literally a billboard, a word, an image that feels like it was placed there just for you. These moments carry a weight that logic alone can't explain. That weight is synchronicity, the hidden language of the universe. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who coined the term, describes synchronicity as a meaningful coincidence, an event where the inner world of thought and emotion suddenly aligns with an external occurrence, in a way that feels too precise to be random. Unlike coincidences, which are meaningless overlaps, synchronicities carry significance. They feel like a wink from reality, a reminder that your life is part of a much larger design. But here's the paradox. While synchronicity can feel magical, it is not actually rare. In fact, it is happening all the time. The reason we notice so few of these moments is not because they are scarce, but because we haven't yet learned how to read the language. Imagine for a moment that synchronicity is like radio waves filling the air around you. They're everywhere, constantly transmitting messages. But unless you tune your receiver to the right frequency, you'll never hear them. Our minds are those receivers, and most of us are stuck on the wrong channel. We're tuned into distraction, worry, and rigid logic. We're too busy scrolling, rushing, and thinking in straight lines to notice the subtle patterns playing out around us. But if you adjust the dial, even slightly, you start to hear the music that was always there. Synchronicities often arrive disguised in the ordinary. They can be numbers that repeat on clocks, receipts, or license plates. They can be names or words that surface again and again in unexpected places. They can be moments of timing so precise that they stop you in your tracks. And while skeptics may call them coincidences, anyone who has felt the deep resonance of one knows they carry a completely different energy. It's like the universe has written you a personal note, folded it into reality, and left it for you to find. But what does it mean that the universe speaks in this hidden language? Some believe synchronicities are a form of spiritual guidance, a higher intelligence directing us gently toward alignment with our true path. Others see them as reflections of the unconscious mind, a way for suppressed knowledge or intuition to surface into awareness. Whether you frame it in mystical or psychological terms, the effect is the same. Synchronicities remind us that life is not random, that there is a dialogue happening between us and the world. Think of your life as a novel. You are the main character, moving through a story filled with plot twists, challenges, and discoveries. Synchronicities are like foreshadowing subtle hints left by the author to guide you toward the bigger arc of your journey. The problem is that most of us don't notice them, or worse, we dismiss them when we do. We are so trained to prioritize logic and linear thinking that we often ignore the very signs pointing us toward growth, healing, and opportunity. But once you begin to recognize synchronicities, something shifts. You realize that you are not walking alone, not stumbling randomly through chaos, but moving through a universe that is intimately aware of you. It's a deeply comforting and empowering realization. Suddenly, life feels alive. It feels like a conversation rather than a monologue. The small coincidences transform into meaningful markers, and your sense of isolation dissolves into connection. What's remarkable is how universal this experience is once people begin to pay attention. From ancient shamans interpreting omens in nature, to poets finding inspiration in chance encounters, to modern people noticing repeating numbers on their phone's synchronicity transcends culture, time, and belief systems. It is not bound to religion or philosophy. It belongs to human experience itself. And yet, despite its presence in every era and culture, synchronicity remains a hidden language because few take it seriously. We live in a world that demands proof, data, and measurable outcomes. Synchronicity does not arrive with statistics or scientific guarantees. It arrives quietly through whispers, nudges, and subtle alignments. To engage with it requires a different kind of intelligence, not the sharpness of logic, but the softness of awareness. In this way, synchronicity is both a challenge and an invitation. It challenges our assumptions about what is real, what is possible, and what it means to be guided by something larger than ourselves. But it also invites us into a more enchanted way of living, where even the most ordinary day can reveal extraordinary patterns if we are willing to look. As we continue this journey, remember this: synchronicity is not something that happens to a lucky few. It is not a rare phenomenon reserved for mystics or spiritual teachers. It is the universal language of connection happening around you at this very moment. The question is not whether it exists, but whether you are ready to learn how to hear it. Here's the irony about synchronicities. They are not complicated. They do not require rituals, advanced training, or some rare mystical initiation. They happen in the flow of everyday life, during your commute, in casual conversations, while scrolling through a feed, or even while standing in line at the grocery store. The simplicity is almost frustrating, because it means that the extraordinary has been hiding in plain sight all along. Yet that same simplicity is also why people miss it. We have been conditioned to believe that answers must be difficult, that wisdom must be complex, and that guidance must come in dramatic, undeniable forms. Subtlety, however, is often overlooked. Society has trained us to filter reality through the lens of logic and practicality. From an early age, we are told to dismiss anything that doesn't fit neatly into measurable, rational boxes. If you tell someone that you keep seeing the same numbers or hearing the same name in unexpected places, they'll likely smile politely or call it coincidence. This cultural programming convinces us that meaning exists only where science or logic can prove it. And so, we grow blind to the living patterns unfolding in front of us. But let's pause here. Why do we crave complication? Because complication gives the illusion of importance. If something is complex, we assume it must be valuable. If something is simple, we assume it must be trivial. Synchronicity challenges that mindset. It is simplicity in its purest form. The universe doesn't need a grand stage or flashing neon lights to communicate. It uses everyday symbols. It speaks softly, through timing, repetition, and connection. But since it feels too ordinary, we dismiss it as random. Think of it this way. Most people are waiting for a thunderbolt moment, some cosmic revelation that shakes their entire world. But synchronicity rarely arrives with thunder. It arrives with whispers. And the reason most people never hear it is because they are listening for the wrong sound. Another reason synchronicities go unnoticed is that our modern lives are filled with noise, both literal and mental. Constant notifications, Endless to-do lists and the pressure of productivity drown out the subtle rhythms of reality. Synchronicity requires presence, and presence requires slowing down. Yet slowing down feels almost impossible in a world that equates worth with busyness. We live at such a frantic pace that we miss the signs right in front of us. This is why synchronicity often shows up most clearly during moments of stillness or crisis. When someone is grieving, questioning their path, or pausing long enough to reflect, synchronicities seem to multiply. Why? Because those moments create openness. When the constant chatter of the mind quiets down, the subtle language of the universe can finally be heard. It's also worth noting that ego plays a role in overlooking synchronicities. The ego resists the idea that something larger than itself might be guiding the journey. It wants to believe it is in control, that every achievement and direction comes from its own cleverness. To acknowledge synchronicity is to admit that life is co-authored, that there is a deeper intelligence weaving threads alongside your choices. This can be humbling, and for some, even uncomfortable. But humility is not weakness, it's the doorway to connection. When we let go of the need to control or rationalize everything, synchronicity suddenly has room to reveal itself. It is not that synchronicities appear more often. It is that we finally see what was always there. So, why doesn't everyone embrace it? Because seeing synchronicity requires a subtle shift in perspective. It requires believing that meaning can exist outside of reason, that not everything has to be proven to be real, and that mystery is not the enemy of truth, but a part of it. This is a difficult leap for a culture addicted to certainty, yet those who take that leap discover something profound. The simplicity of synchronicity is its power. You don't need to master esoteric practices or chase enlightenment for decades. You simply need to pay attention. And in that paying attention, you find that life itself becomes illuminated. Synchronicity is not hiding because it is rare. It is hiding because it is ordinary. It is woven into the fabric of our everyday lives, waiting for us to notice. The missed phone call that leads to a new opportunity. The chance encounter that shifts your entire direction. The word that repeats until you finally understand its message. These are not accidents. They are invitations. And the moment you accept those invitations, the world changes. What once looked random becomes meaningful. What once felt silent becomes alive with conversation. What once seemed simple reveals itself as profound. This is the paradox. Synchronicity is so simple that it hides in plain sight. But the second you choose to honor it, you step into a different way of living, one where every moment holds the possibility of guidance, and where nothing is ever truly meaningless. Why is it that two people can walk down the same street, see the same events unfold, and yet only one of them notices the strange alignment that feels like synchronicity? The answer lies not in the external world, but in the inner mechanics of perception. Synchronicities don't simply occur out there, waiting to be found. They emerge through the meeting point of reality and awareness. The psychology of recognition is at the heart of understanding why some people live in a world filled with meaningful signs while others move through a landscape that appears random and empty. At the core of this lies the way our brain filters reality. Every second, our senses are bombarded with millions of bits of information: colors, sounds, movements, words, faces, patterns. But if we consciously registered all of this, we'd be overwhelmed. So the brain relies on a filter called the reticular activating system, RAS. The RAS acts like a gatekeeper, deciding which pieces of information are relevant enough to enter conscious awareness. This means that what you notice in your environment isn't random. It's being selected based on what your mind already considers important. Here's the key. The RAS is influenced by focus and belief. If you start thinking about buying a red car, suddenly you'll see red cars everywhere. If you're planning a trip, You'll overhear conversations about travel more often. This isn't because those things suddenly multiplied. It's because your brain tuned your perception to match your focus. The same principle applies to synchronicities. When you open yourself to the possibility of meaningful connections, your reyes begins to allow those patterns into awareness. What you once dismissed as noise now feels like signal, but it goes deeper than brain mechanics. Synchronicities also reveal the intimate relationship between belief and perception. If you believe the universe is random, then even the most profound alignment will be brushed off as coincidence. If you believe life is meaningful, those alignments become confirmations. It is not about inventing meaning where none exists, but about acknowledging that reality itself is interpreted through the lens of belief. The same event can either be a meaningless accident or a guiding message, depending on how you choose to see it. This is why skeptics often miss synchronicities. Their worldview does not allow for them to be real, so their mind automatically discards them. On the other hand, people who allow mystery and openness into their worldview tend to recognize synchronicities more frequently. It is not that one group lives in a world with more or fewer signs, that one group's perception is tuned to see what the other has filtered out. Recognition also ties to something psychologists call confirmation bias, the tendency to notice evidence that supports what you already believe. Many dismiss synchronicity as nothing more than confirmation bias. And while that explanation may be partly true, it doesn't tell the full story. The deeper truth is that confirmation bias is not a flaw, it's a feature. It is the mind's way of highlighting what matters most to you. The fact that your inner state influences what you perceive in the outer world is not a dismissal of synchronicity. It is a demonstration of how inner and outer are linked. Think of it like this. If synchronicity is the universe whispering, then confirmation bias is the ear that makes you able to hear it. You don't notice everything you notice, what resonates with your inner state. And that resonance is where synchronicity lives. This also explains why synchronicities often appear during times of transition, struggle, or decision. When you are searching for clarity, your mind becomes hyper-attuned to guidance. Your rays and your unconscious align to notice any sign, any pattern, any clue that could lead you forward. And because you are more open and more focused, synchronicities multiply, or rather, your recognition of them does. It's not that the universe suddenly became louder. It's that you finally started listening. There is also a neurological rhythm at play. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. It is designed to find order in chaos, to connect dots, to create meaning. This is why humans see shapes in clouds, faces in shadows, and narratives in random events. Some argue this tendency proves that synchronicity is just an illusion. But here's the counterpoint. What if the ability to recognize patterns is not a flaw, but a gift? What if the very design of the brain is proof that we are meant to live in dialogue with a meaningful universe? When you look at it this way, synchronicity becomes less about magical intervention and more about awareness. It is about the meeting point of psychology and mystery, science and spirit. Your brain is built to filter reality. Your beliefs shape what you see, and your openness determines whether synchronicities reveal themselves. And once you embrace this, something powerful happens. You realize that synchronicity is not something you passively wait for. It's something you actively cultivate by choosing awareness, by shifting your focus, and by opening your belief system. You become a participant in the dialogue, not just a bystander. The psychology of recognition teaches us that synchronicities are not hiding from us, we are hiding from them. And the moment we decide to see, the signs begin to appear. Imagine a life where each day feels like a guided path rather than a random sequence of events, where instead of struggling against the current, you feel carried by it. This state is often described as flow, a rhythm of existence where timing, opportunity, and meaning weave together seamlessly. Synchronicities are not just isolated sparks of wonder. They are the signposts that point us toward flow. And when we begin to follow them, life transforms. Flow happens when synchronicities are not just noticed, but trusted. Most people experience synchronicity, smile at the oddness of it, and then move on as if nothing happened. But those who pause, listen, and act on synchronicities discover that they often open doorways. A chance meeting leads to a partnership. A repeated symbol highlights the decision you already knew in your heart was right. A perfectly timed coincidence becomes the bridge. Between one chapter of your life and the next dot, there are countless stories of people who attribute life-changing outcomes to following synchronicities. An artist who kept seeing references to a certain city finally visited it and found the inspiration that redefined her career. A man who kept encountering the same unusual word ended up meeting someone connected to it, someone who would later become his spouse. These aren't fairy tales. They are examples of how, when we allow synchronicities to guide us, the path unfolds with uncanny precision. The beauty of synchronicity is that it bypasses rigid logic and appeals directly to intuition. Logic often says, "That's impractical," or "That makes no sense." But intuition whispers, "This feels right." When synchronicity confirms that whisper, it becomes easier to step forward with courage. In this way, synchronicities act as bridges between reason and intuition, helping us to trust the invisible threads pulling us toward growth. Living in flow with synchronicities also shifts the emotional texture of life. Instead of feeling lost, people begin to feel supported. Instead of doubting every decision, they feel nudged in the right direction. Instead of life appearing cold and indifferent, it begins to feel alive and interactive, almost like a dance between the self and the universe. This sense of partnership creates resilience. Even during challenges, synchronicities remind you that you are not alone. That meaning is still being woven even through struggle. Of course, living this way doesn't mean everything is effortless or perfect. Flow is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of alignment. Sometimes synchronicities guide us into difficult but necessary transitions, ending a job, moving cities, releasing a relationship. These moments can feel uncomfortable, but when guided by synchronicities, they also carry a sense of rightness. The difference is that instead of resisting, you begin to trust the unfolding, even when it doesn't match your plans. One of the most profound aspects of living in flow is how it redefines success. In a world obsessed with control, achievement is often measured by force, how much effort you can push, how many obstacles you can overcome. But flow teaches that true success is not forced, it is aligned. It comes not from manipulating reality, but from moving with it. Synchronicities show you where the river is already flowing, and by stepping into that current, progress becomes natural. Spiritual traditions across the world have long described this state. Taoism calls it Wu Wei, effortless action in harmony with the Tao. In psychology, it's called the flow state, where peak creativity and performance emerge without strain. In personal spirituality, it is often described as divine timing. No matter what name we give it, the experience is the same. A sense that life is not random but orchestrated, and that synchronicities are the signals pointing you toward the right score in that orchestration. What's striking is how flow reshapes even the smallest details of life. Suddenly, delays feel purposeful. A missed train leads to meeting someone important. A canceled plan opens space for the exact rest you needed. What used to feel like frustration begins to feel like choreography. The more you recognize this, the less you cling to control, and the more you surrender to trust. And trust is the key. Flow is not about knowing everything in advance. It's about trusting that the next step will be revealed at the right time, often through synchronicities. You may not see the entire map, but you learn to follow the breadcrumbs. And strangely, those breadcrumbs always seem to lead exactly where you were meant to be. When you live this way, something else remarkable happens. Synchronicities increase. Not because the universe suddenly favors you, but because you have tuned your awareness so finely that you begin to notice them everywhere. What was once invisible becomes visible. What once felt rare becomes daily. And what once seemed impossible, living a guided, meaningful life, becomes your new normal. Living in flow with synchronicities is not about escaping reality. It is about seeing reality more clearly as a living dialogue. The signs are already present. The guidance is already there. The only question is whether you are willing to recognize it and allow it to lead you. By now, it's clear that synchronicities aren't rare miracles. They're constant, woven into the fabric of daily life. The real challenge isn't whether they exist, but whether we're willing to notice them. And once you notice them, the question becomes, how do you cultivate this awareness so that synchronicity becomes a guiding force rather than an occasional surprise? The truth is, seeing synchronicities everywhere is not about creating them. It's about awakening to what has always been present. The first step is slowing down. Synchronicities thrive in moments of awareness. When life is rushed, distracted, and noisy, they pass unnoticed. Start by carving out even brief pauses during your day. A walk without headphones. A moment of silence before checking your phone. 5 minutes of mindful breathing. These small acts of stillness create the space where patterns can reveal themselves. It's not about adding complexity, it's about removing the clutter, so you can hear the whispers already there. The second step is intentional attention. When something unusual catches your eye, whether it's a repeating number, a phrase, or a symbol that keeps resurfacing, don't brush it off. Pause. Ask yourself, why did this stand out to me? What might it be pointing to? You don't need to force an answer immediately. Simply acknowledging the event as potentially meaningful strengthens your ability to recognize synchronicities. Over time, this habit turns into a sensitivity, a kind of sixth sense for patterns in your environment. Another powerful practice is journaling synchronicities. Write them down. Keep track of repeating numbers, phrases, encounters, or coincidences that feel charged with meaning. At first, they may seem disconnected, but over weeks and months, themes emerge. You may notice that a certain symbol shows up whenever you're on the brink of making a major decision, or that certain people consistently cross your path during periods of transition. Patterns only reveal themselves fully when you give them a place to accumulate. Journaling transforms scattered moments into a coherent dialogue. Meditation also enhances synchronicity awareness. By quieting the mind, meditation attunes you to subtler layers of reality. You become more sensitive to intuitive nudges, and those nudges often align with external synchronicities. The inner and outer begin to mirror each other more clearly. This is why so many people who meditate regularly report an increase in meaningful coincidences. Meditation doesn't create synchronicity. It makes you receptive to it. Another key principle is trusting the nudge. When synchronicities appear, it's tempting to dismiss them as random or to overanalyze them until their meaning gets lost. Instead, lean into curiosity and trust. If you keep encountering the same symbol, follow where it leads, even if it seems trivial. If you run into the same person 3 times in 1 week, reach out. If a book or idea keeps showing up, read it. Synchronicities are breadcrumbs. Following them often leads you to opportunities and insights you would never have reached through logic alone. Of course, this doesn't mean every coincidence is a divine message. Discernment matters. The key difference between a random event and a synchronicity is the sense of resonance it carries. A true synchronicity feels charged. It stirs something within you, as if reality itself is leaning closer, saying, "Pay attention." learning to trust that feeling is part of developing your inner compass. The beauty of this practice is that it creates a feedback loop. The more you recognize synchronicities, the more they appear. The more they appear, the more you trust them. And the more you trust them, the more fluid and aligned your life becomes. Soon, you no longer need to question whether the universe is guiding you. You live in the certainty that it always is. Seeing synchronicities everywhere also redefines your relationship with the ordinary. Life stops being a flat, predictable routine and becomes an unfolding story rich with symbols and clues. A random conversation with a stranger can feel like a passage written just for you. A delayed flight can turn into a pivotal encounter. Even challenges begin to carry meaning as synchronicities emerge to show you the hidden purpose within them. And perhaps the most profound shift is this: you stop feeling alone. Synchronicities remind you that your life is entangled with a greater intelligence, that the universe is not indifferent, but interactive, not silent, but conversational. Each alignment becomes a reminder that you are seen, guided, and part of something larger than yourself. So how do you see synchronicities everywhere? By slowing down, by paying attention, by journaling, meditating, trusting, and allowing meaning to emerge. You don't need to force them. You simply need to notice them. And once you do, you'll realize they were never hiding. They were always present, patiently waiting for you to open your eyes. When that happens, life is no longer random. It becomes a dialogue, a dance, a story unfolding in real time, where synchronicities are the punctuation marks guiding you from one chapter to the next. And once you live this way, you'll wonder how you ever thought life was silent.